Now look, so the story behind Uncle Nearest isn't exactly how most people are framing it. It's a tangled web of lawsuits, fraud allegations, and a crazy timeline. Today, we're going to be breaking it all down and establishing what exactly happened and what led up to this lawsuit.
So in July of this year, Farm Credit Mid-America, which is a lending company, filed a lawsuit against Uncle Nearest alleging a few things, and I'm going to highlight the main three. So number one, Farm Credit Mid-America says they've loaned Uncle Nearest over $100 million and the company has stopped making payments on those loans. They say the first loan was given to them in July of 2022 and it was for $35 million. But over the course of a year, the amount of the loan was increased 7 times until it eventually hit $67 million. So in total, that first loan was for $67 million. The second loan, which was issued around that same time, was for $20 million. And then the third loan was issued about 6 months later, and that one was for $15 million. So when you add all that up, plus interest, and then subtract any of the payments that Uncle Nearest has made, Farm Credit Mid-America says that Uncle Nearest currently owes them $108,245,828.22. And they want their money and they want it now. Okay, reason number two that Farm Credit is suing Uncle Nearest is because they say the only reason they agreed to loan Uncle Nearest all of this money is because they told them they had a bunch of barrels of whiskey in inventory that could be used as collateral. But the problem, according to Farm Credit, is that Uncle Nearest lied about how much inventory they actually had. Follow me. So according to the paperwork, Farm Credit agreed to keep increasing that first loan because Uncle Nearest told them that they had 77,000 barrels of whiskey on hand. And so the agreement with collateral is that if Uncle Nearest ever stops making their payments for the loan, Farm Credit can pull up and grab those 77,000 barrels of whiskey. But now that it's come time to pull up because Uncle Nearest isn't paying their loan, Farm Credit has learned that Uncle Nearest doesn't actually have all those barrels of inventory. They have about $21 million less than that, and Farm Credit is not happy. All right, moving on to reason number three that Farm Credit is suing. And it's because, according to them, Uncle Nearest agreed to use about $2 million from one of their loans to purchase a property in Martha's Vineyard. It was going to be an Uncle Nearest property, and the purpose of it was to host branding events and to rent to other distributors for co-branding opportunities. Now that sounds all good, but the problem, according to Farm America, is that after Uncle Nearest received the money, they then created a brand new company, a new LLC, to purchase the Martha's Vineyard property. In layman's terms, and why this is a problem, is because legally, this Martha's Vineyard property is not owned by Uncle Nearest. It's owned by this new LLC they created, UN House MV LLC. And so typically, since Uncle Nearest has stopped paying back this loan, Farm Credit would be able to foreclose on this property, kick them out, take the property back, and hopefully sell it to recoup some of their losses. But in this instance, since the house isn't owned by Uncle Nearest, Farm Credit doesn't have much recourse to do anything. The house isn't in Uncle Nearest's name, and Farm Credit didn't lend the money to UN House MV LLC. And so Farm Credit says that this little switcheroo was a violation of their agreement, and that's why they're suing. Hopefully that made sense. So that's their lawsuit, and Uncle Nearest has responded. Regarding the $21 million inventory discrepancy, the Uncle Nearest team says, yes, we did give y'all the wrong numbers, but it's not our fault. Our former chief financial officer, who has now been fired, is the one who gave y'all those numbers. And instead of y'all verifying what he told y'all just took his word and gave us $1 million. Y'all bad. Okay, they didn't really say y'all bad, but those are the vibes. The response goes on to say that no one at Uncle Nearest even knew that the CFO lied about this inventory, but once the Weavers found out about this discrepancy, they themselves told Farm Credit Mid-America about it so that they could deal with it. Next up, the response addresses the Martha's Vineyard property and says that Farm Credit Mid-America was fully aware of what Uncle Nearest's plans were regarding that house, and Farm Credit never requested to get any stake in the property. The response says that executives from Farm Credit even came out to the property for its inaugural gospel brunch, and their execs went on group outings and even did some bike riding while they were there. And lastly, the response says that Uncle Nearest has made some payments towards these loans. They know they owe them, and in 2024, they paid almost $9 million towards the loan, and so far in 2025, they've paid $7.5 million. According to Uncle Nearest, the only reason that they stopped is because they hired a third-party financial firm that Farm Credit approved of, and that third-party firm told Uncle Nearest to stop making payments while they sorted out all these issues regarding the previous CFO. The Uncle Nearest team says that they even voiced that they wanted to keep making payments towards this loan, but Farm Credit was fully aware of the recommendation from this third-party firm, and they agreed to the pausing of the payments. And so Uncle Nearest is now confused as to how they're claiming payments haven't been made, but they knew the payments were going on pause. So that's their response. And the overall request from Farm America, outside of them wanting their money back, is for the judge to place a receiver at the head of the Uncle Nearest company. And the receiver is basically someone to take over the company while this gets settled. Uncle Nearest has objected. They do not want a receiver, but Farm Credit Mid-America is saying, put somebody over there.
So now that we understand the initial complaint and response from Uncle Nearest, there's a couple missing details that I want to add in regards to clarification of what was going on exactly with the barrels. These barrels aren't exactly missing or didn't exist. The thing is, these barrels were being housed by a third party. Under the agreement of the lender, third-party housed inventory should not be included in the collateral. Most interesting part of this is that the person who notified Farm Credit of the discrepancy was actually Uncle Nearest. And this is for us as listeners to really understand, is that when we are looking at a legal dispute, it is not the job of the plaintiffs to paint a full picture of what happened. It is their job to bring up a complaint that would establish legal grounds for them to get whatever it is that they are requesting. And this is where we really need to pay attention, because this timeline is what's going to tell us exactly what led up to this lawsuit. All right, so looks like everything started to break off around January 2024. That's where we get the first missed payment to Farm Credit. That missed payment triggers Uncle Nearest to start looking into their finances. And that's when they start to notice some discrepancies. And that is when Farm Credit is first notified that something is going on at Uncle Nearest. After Uncle Nearest notices these discrepancies, they decide to initiate a third-party auditor to come in and look at the company. They aren't just looking at Uncle Nearest, they're looking at every single last employee and board member, including Farm Weaver and her husband, including the CEO, everybody, for them to figure out what is going on with the money at Uncle Nearest. The findings of this audit is what leads to the former CFO being fired and Farm Credit being notified of fraud and issues at Uncle Nearest. So Farm Credit initiates its own audit, and those findings do confirm that there was something going on at Uncle Nearest that both parties need to come to an understanding on. I believe the tension between these two entities arrived when the solution to the issue that Farm Credit came up with was to place someone on the board of Uncle Nearest. It seems that there was a disagreement in regards to the person being placed on the board. And ultimately, both parties agreed, said, hey, okay, so you don't want me to place somebody on your board, but we're going to do a receivership because there needs to be more transparency. And this is the detail I think that everybody is missing. Uncle Nearest is not denying that fraud occurred at their company. What they are saying is that they themselves were victims of said fraud. For us to understand more on how fraud was being committed against Uncle Nearest, I think we need to look at the case against the former CFO so we can establish what exactly was happening with the fraud at the company. If you find this video interesting, please make sure that you subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. This is one of many videos that we're going to be doing on this Uncle Nearest lawsuit so that we can understand what exactly is happening over at Uncle Nearest. And if you find videos like this interesting, you're most certainly going to like this one. And until next time, stay beautiful, stay blessed, stay black. This is Jade, and you're watching Get Into the Black. Bye-bye.